interpreting and translating are two different concepts.
Yeah.
Many people use this word interchangeably. And, sometimes when I go to a conference, people say, oh, here's a translator. I'm like, I'm not the translator. When you're an interpreter,
You're doing it
you're
on the
doing it
stand.
real time.
Yeah,
So
you're doing
whatever
it.
came out of your mouth is what came out, and there's no going back.
You found your passion.
I found my passion.
You found your passion. That's exactly what
it's
it
like
is.
doing what you love and loving what you do. And the more knowledge you acquire, you realize that, you are just a tiny speck in this entire universe, and there's so much to learn. We at the booth, we go ahead and take our laptops, so we have, we're searching for the terminology in real time. Sometimes we have a booth mate, so we work in pairs.
Yeah.
So we never work alone because it's 8 hours long, and you cannot interpret for 8 hours on your own.
I always say it, if it's to be, it's up to me. Welcome to another episode of Step by Step Talks. Today, my guests, I have an amazing guest with us. We never think about how interpretation and translation has affected world economy and growth. Everything we do today, every country we visit has a different language. Of course, there is a communal language, that's English, that's spoken everywhere, but not that it is used everywhere. My guest today, Anjana Lachman, has been interpreting and translating since 2016 in Panama. An amazing person who's got such a talent, and she can interpret or translate from Spanish, English, Hindi, three very difficult languages if we have to look into interpretation and translation. Well, anyway, without any further ado, I'm going to introduce to you Anjana Lachman, my very special guest. Welcome.
Thank you so much for the lovely introduction.
You're very welcome, Anjana. The first time I met you, I was very impressed. Translation, interpretation is completely a different realm, and you have to be really with it when you're working. Now, you have done some amazing work, and I'm going to let you introduce yourself and tell us how you got to where you are today, how you started. I believe you're doing a lot of work with the United Nations. You do a lot of work with government officials, with the ministries, and you also are, I guess I call it a sworn-in translator or interpreter, but I think in Panama there's a different terminology. So I'm going to leave it to you to explain to our audience today exactly what it is you do and how you got here.
Well, to start with, I have been interpreting since the year 2004, actually. I started out at a company here in Panama called Language Line Services. So at that time, we used to do consecutive interpretations. And I must stop and make a parenthesis here saying that in Panama, there is no formal let's say, education for interpreters. So there's no such thing as like, go to a college or a university and get an interpretation degree. So, you were just thrown into the water and, you got to learn to swim.
Wow.
So I started with this company, Language Line, and they had a series of trainings for potential interpreters. Of course, the first time I took the test, I failed miserably.
Oh no! Was that for Spanish English, right?
Yes, for Spanish
wow.
English. Yeah. So, of course, a 20-year-old girl miserably failing. Of course, I cried that night. But my husband was the one who supported me. He said, well, you failed once, but you get up and do it again.
Very good.
So that's when I did my second test, and definitely I passed. And then they had a series of trainings, and then that's when I started my career as an interpreter. At that time, we started with consecutive interpretation. So consecutive interpretation is basically I am over the phone, right? Over the phone consecutive, and I have a doctor speaking, then I have the patient speaking. So the doctor speaks, I speak, the patient speaks, I speak, the doctor speaks. So you have to take good notes. You have to have awesome note-taking skills. And so you interpret back and forth. That's consecutive interpretation.
Amazing.
And then I stopped that because I thought, in 2012, I said, you know what, I'm done with this. I don't want to do anything with interpretation. I'm bored. I'm tired. Let me try something new. But, when you have seeded your thought and who you are, it's deep rooted in you. It just comes back to you. The circumstances comes back to you.
Okay.
So I stopped in 2012, and then I went ahead for a degree, an undergraduate degree in business. And then all of a sudden, when I was in my last year of finishing my undergraduate degree, a colleague came over and she said, you are a certified translator. I'm going to explain in a bit what that is. You are a certified translator, right? I'm like, yeah, I am. Can you please translate this document for me? I'm like, I'm done with that.
Oh
I
no.
don't do translations anymore.
Yeah.
And she said, no, please go ahead and do it for me. I am willing to pay whatever you want. So I just gave her an exaggerated number, hoping that she would say no, but she agreed.
Oh wow.
And then that's where I realized, when as I started doing the document, I was like, and then I investigated some terminology, because you have to investigate. It's very important to investigate and to learn. If you do not have that continued education in you, then don't be an interpreter, because you have to study lifelong.
It's amazing. As I was doing my research, I found that when they first started interpretation and translation, the first translators and interpreters made so many mistakes because they didn't know how to translate certain words. So they'd miss out big words, and the whole context of the message was changed. Now I'm talking I'm talking hundreds of years ago when this first happened. So the context of the message used to be changed, and people used to understand other things. But then now I think there are rigorous rules because legality is a big problem, right? Getting the wrong message across.
Well, it's very important not to get the wrong message across.
Yeah.
There are some tools and techniques that we can use if the speaker is going too fast or too slow, but those are rather techniques of the interpretation. So just going back to what I was saying, as I was translating the words, I was like, this is who I am. This is what I am.
Yeah.
And that's when I realized I have to go back to this world of translation and interpretation. And that's when in 2016 I started again. I am self-employed. I am an independent interpreter. So I work for different entities, as you mentioned at the beginning, and that's where everything started all over again.
So Step by Step Talks is a promoter for women being financially independent. Now, it's amazing that you started your own business as a translator interpreter in Panama in 2016. Were there many people who were doing that at the same time? Do you know many people in this field, or was it a very small niche?
To be very honest, it's a very small niche.
Yeah.
And there are not that many, because not everybody who's a translator is an interpreter. Not every interpreter is a translator either.
Yeah.
So in Panama, it is a protected profession. So you have to be a Panamanian to be a translator.
Oh, I see.
Correct. So then you do your test, and you get your authorized public translator license. So unfortunately, I don't have it with me today.
Yeah, that's okay.
But yes, it's exactly a license that we carry, and we can actually translate documents, and we have to sign the documents that we translate.
So tell me, what are some of the cases that you've done? I mean, you can't share everything, but do you have something very exciting to share with our audience that, if you get into this career or if you get this profession, something amazing happens out of that?
Well, as I said earlier, it's very important to study.
Yeah.
So something very important is that I would suggest is never step into the booth without studying. And studying doesn't mean that, the person or the speaker is going to give you his or her notes, or the speaker is going to give you his or her slides, because that happens, but seldom.
Oh.
And if it does, well, consider yourself lucky.
Really? So they don't always give you the
They
notes?
don't always give you the information. So,
Okay.
but if they do, then, you have your slides, you can go ahead and study the slides, and, you make your glossary. It's very important to create your own glossary of the whatever conference that you're doing, because then, in 2016, going back to 2016, I stopped being a consecutive interpreter. Rather, I became a conference interpreter. So there's a difference between consecutive interpretation and conference conference interpretation, because in a conference interpreter, the conference interpreter goes into a booth.
Okay.
And we have our headset, we wear our headsets, right? And then we're listening to the speaker live, and we're simultaneously interpreting whatever the speaker is saying.
Okay.
So that's what I mentioned earlier. I think I said I was going to talk later about the technicality. So if the speaker is going too fast, you have some certain ways where you can chunk the information. The idea, you have to give the idea of the information. Maybe you don't interpret word for word because the speaker is going too fast, but you definitely have to transmit what the speaker is trying to say, the message that the speaker is trying to get across to his audience.
Okay, so when you say you have to study, clarify that. What do you mean? What do you mean, like you have to study before you go?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Well, the longest I have ever studied was like 15 days for a medical interpretation because I was going for a medical conference for plastic surgery.
Okay.
So I did study almost 2 weeks for that conference. So basically what you have to do is, if you have normally whoever's organizing the event gives you sort of the itinerary of the event, so you know which doctor is speaking at what time. So let's say you have a medical conference, so you check the name of the doctor, you put the doctor, you search the doctor up. If the doctor has any conferences that he might have done online, you can actually check the pace at which he's going. What accent does he use? Because there are many, even if the doctor is speaking in English, there are many different accents, right?
Yeah.
So you have to know that, and then you have to know what terminology does he use. Is there a word that he uses very often? And then based on that, you start making your glossary. And based on the speciality of the doctor, let's say you're talking about pediatrics, then you check all of the terminology in relation to pediatrics or whatever it is that you're going to be interpreting for.
So how did you learn this? There was no schooling. How did you learn all this? Because
There was no
that's a
schooling.
lot to know.
It was learning on the go.
Yeah.
It was amazing. I mean, people say that you can learn any skill, and I definitely agree to that. You can. But sometimes the skill is just within you. You have that, the diamond in the rough, so to say.
Yeah.
And then it's part of you. It's part of who you are. And then you just relate to it. And as people, you get amazing people along the way. Definitely you get training by experienced trans interpreters. So I was very fortunate to have many mentors along the way. I couldn't have done it without my mentors.
Yeah.
And they would correct me, you should do it like this, you should do it like that. And 20 years later, here I am.
Telling other people what to do. Yeah. Until today.
No, I don't think so. And I'm still learning.
You're still learning? That's very good. Well, you've got a knack of liking. You like to learn. Obviously, that's why you're reading all these things before you go to your conferences.
Well, I certainly hope that any interpreter likes to learn, because there's no end to it.
Yeah, you to keep
There's
learning.
no end to it.
Now, so when you go into a conference and you do the translation or the interpretation, whichever you're doing, you go back home again, and then you've got to do all the work of getting it all written out. Or
no, how does it work? Let's back up. Yeah. So interpreting and translating are two different concepts. Many people use this word interchangeably. And, sometimes when I go to a conference, people say, oh, here's a translator. I'm like, I'm not a translator, I'm an interpreter. Yeah. But you don't tend to correct the client, so you don't say anything. So you're like, okay, yeah, I'm the translator. But the biggest difference is that translating is done on paper. So you have a document and you're actually translating the document. Yeah. And you have time to do that, right? You can check on the document, you read the document, you have the sentence structure, and then you give a round in your house, go eat something, and then you come back and you say, I don't like the way the sentence is structured, and then you restructure the sentence. So you have that leeway, you have that time. You can investigate further whatever term that you want to use on paper. When you're an interpreter, you're doing it real time. Yeah. So whatever came out of your mouth is what came out, and there's no going back. So you're interpreting, you're talking real time.
So, and that's being recorded.
And that's... Well, it depends on the client. Sometimes the client records, sometimes doesn't record, and that's another topic that I probably like to leave it aside, because there's some rules and regulations as to whether you should. There's some discrepancies whether you should record an interpreter, you shouldn't record an interpreter. Should there be an informed consent sign that I'm recording the interpreter? So that's another world. However, going back to the translation versus interpretation, the interpreter does everything, as I said earlier, real time.
Yeah.
And you don't have time to think. So whatever comes out of your mouth is what comes out. And that is why you need to study.
Yeah.
So if you study and you have
Makes
knowledge on
sense.
the topic, you can
Yeah.
talk about it.
Of course.
And you can talk about it with authority.
Yeah.
So that's what interpreters need, because interpreters need to almost emulate what the speaker is saying. Sometimes even, when the speaker is extremely excited or wanting to say something, you should emulate at least, the tone of the speaker, because, you are giving over that message. And the tone is very important.
So you need to have that confidence to give that tone and that message. But
Of
if you have the
course.
knowledge, you're going to give that confidence.
Yes,
and
maybe you wouldn't mimic
but still, you need the
the
confidence.
speaker, because that might come off as rude.
Yeah.
But you have to go along those same, if the speaker is excited, you talk a little bit more
excited.
excitedly or in a different tone of voice and whatnot.
I think it's amazing. I think it's an amazing career. It's so interesting. You learn so much all day, right?
Yes.
It's amazing. Now tell me, with the artificial intelligence and ChatGPT that's come in, and I was just sort of, I use artificial intelligence all the time. I use ChatGPT. How has it affected your business? Because now it's easy to translate or interpret at the same time. Like, it's pretty easy. Is it accurate? Is it being used? Are big companies like the UN using them? What is happening?
Well, that is a great debate, even happening amongst our own, let's say, group of interpreters, right? Our own society. Basically, we've come into an agreement where we have decided to use technology as our ally, instead of looking at it as, as our enemy.
Oh, yeah.
So many times I would use ChatGPT to study. Interpreters out there, you can actually ask ChatGPT to make you a table of the terminology in Spanish and the target language, and you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, so that's easy for you. That
So
makes it much easier.
It makes it easier for us, and studying has become a little bit more interactive with ChatGPT.
Yeah.
I have used it a couple of times. I definitely don't put anything confidential in ChatGPT, because we still don't know the extent of it. We don't know whether the information is going to be public or whether it can be found or whatnot. So you can use it to study. I wouldn't put anything confidential.
Yeah.
But I do use it to extract terminology, certain generalities, and things like that.
Oh, you do use it then?
Yes.
And do you think it would take over?
I think there's still time. Future is fate.
Yeah.
We don't know what's going to happen in the future. I don't think it's ready just yet. I think, and besides, many times the conferences are confidential, they're private information. And so, as I said, AI is pretty much public. It learns from its surroundings. The AI starts learning as you put information into it. So I think not everybody will be keen on using it because of the confidentiality issues.
Right.
But then again, we don't know. I do think it's not ready yet to be used in any conference so far.
No, that's amazing though. Now, you've been working for many years. Tell the audience of something great that came out of your interpretation or translation, whichever you did, because you do both. Something really, exciting that can, and maybe even something that's based on some women, who became financially independent, or anything that you can remember.
Well, amazingly, interpretation, surprisingly, has been a woman-oriented career. It's a career, I wouldn't say woman-oriented as, not that there are no men who are interpreting. No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that it is a woman-dominated career. So there are more women than men in the interpretation world.
Amazing, yeah.
So
is it because they can multitask? You got to think too much at the same time. Right? You have to think of a lot of things.
I wasn't expecting that.
Yeah.
Well, they say that women are good multitaskers. I'm not going to vouch for that. I'm not sure. I've had men who are amazing interpreters, by the way.
Yeah.
So we do have to multitask. There are people who say, multitasking is impossible. I'm saying, okay, you haven't met an interpreter, because we have to sometimes write interpret, search for a term, and talk all at
And
the
think
same
at the
time.
same time.
Because
Yeah.
and think at the same
Yeah,
time.
yeah,
So I've because when we go to the booth
yeah.
and you know what a
Yeah,
booth
yeah, yeah.
is,
Yeah, I've
correct? Like
seen
it's
them at
like
the you. Yeah,
a gray box that we have to get into.
soundproof.
So very soundproof,
Yeah,
and we are usually kept at the very end of the conference, so people hardly notice us.
yeah.
But lately, I've been seeing that many of the conferences, the interpreters are being thanked for, so that's a good change. And well, anyway, we at the booth we go ahead and take our laptops, so we have we're searching for the terminology in real time. Sometimes we have a booth mate, so we work in pairs.
Yeah.
So we never work alone because it's 8 hour long, and you cannot interpret for 8 hours on your own.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I've had experience because I speak French. I did my university in France, and I owned an insurance company that was French in Canada. So we used to go to Quebec for our conferences. Canada is bilingual, but not everybody speaks French. So every time we went for our conferences in Quebec or in Toronto, we used to have interpreters or translators at the back in their booths. So the people who didn't speak French were wearing their headphones
Yes.
to simultaneously listen to what's being said or what's being presented, or
I
vice
think
versa.
interpreters came a lot into light after that movie, The Interpreter. I'm not sure if you saw
Yes,
it.
I did. Yeah.
So
Yeah,
I think,
yeah.
and surprisingly, I haven't seen
So
it
you haven't
yet.
seen it? You should see it. It's a good movie. Yeah.
That's what everybody
Yeah.
says. I
Yeah.
haven't seen it yet. So I think that's where many interpreters came into light, and they started realizing, the work of an interpreter through that movie.
Yeah.
And it is true, we're sitting in the back at the booth, and we're interpreting simultaneously whatever the speaker is saying, and many times you have your booth partner who sort of, if you sort of, you're not sure, you're stuck, because it does happen.
Yeah.
We're all humans, and we get stuck on a word. Then the booth mate either just tells it to you very quickly or writes it down on a piece of paper, and then you're like, oh yeah, perfect. So nowadays you even have WhatsApp, so they sometimes WhatsApp it to you.
Oh,
So
okay,
you
yeah.
have the word even though the person's sitting right next to you.
Yeah, that
So
makes it so
it's
much
kind
easier.
of fun. Yeah,
Yeah, it
using
makes it much
technology has
easier.
become
Yeah.
very much easy. Yeah.
Are there a lot of conferences that happen in Panama?
Thankfully, yes, because Panama is a hub.
Yeah.
So many conferences happen in Panama. And yeah, it's been a pretty good run.
It has. And how many employees do you have in your
No,
company?
as I mentioned at the beginning, I
You're
am
self-employed,
self-employed.
so
Correct.
no employees
So
helping
I
you.
am the
Yeah.
whole and sole representative of my own name, which will be my brand in this case, Anjana Lachman, the interpreter.
Okay, so if the audience needed help, how do they get in touch with you?
Well, I do have my page on LinkedIn.
On
I am
LinkedIn?
also available through Instagram. So yeah, feel free to message me through any of those two platforms.
Perfect. And what is something negative you can say about, being a translator or interpreter? What is the negativity that you could say? But before I go into that, while you're thinking, let's say if you were in the States or if you're in Canada, what courses would they take to be a translator or interpreter? Are there specialized courses?
Well, yes, there are. I know there are. And quite frankly, in Panama, there is a translating course with a little bit of a light shed on interpreting, but it's not, the course is mainly on translating. So in
Okay.
Panama, we do have a translation course.
Yeah.
But we don't have a full-fledged interpreter's course.
Ah, okay.
So just making that clarity and getting that out of the way, there are courses for interpreters, certified medical interpreters in the U.S., and there are master courses in interpreting. Definitely, yes, masters and conference interpreters and stuff like that. Of course.
Oh, good. Now, you're always reading. That's your passion, I would believe, right?
Well, I have other passions, but for my career, I have to investigate a lot.
You have to
That's
investigate
what
a
I
lot.
would say.
So,
Investigate.
what is the kind of, let's say, reading material you'd read for fun?
For fun?
Mm-hmm.
Well, for fun, I could read some self-help books. I could read books in reference to, well, I do like a lot of magic and whatnot. So I still like Harry Potter,
Oh, you
believe
like
it or
Harry
not.
Potter. Oh, good for you. Good for you. Yeah, because I know that interpreters and translators love reading. And they're always reading or they're always learning something, along the way.
Right. Right.
So, what is anything negative that's coming to you in the career that that's or you think everything is great?
Wow. I know there are always positive and negatives to a career, but I think I'm so much in love with my career that I
That this is
cannot
the
think
thing.
about anything
You
negative.
know what? You found your passion.
I found my
You found
passion.
your passion. That's exactly what
It's
it
like
is.
doing what you love and loving what you do,
Yeah.
and things become lighter along the way. I just recently would like to share. So,
I
and the
did
more
read Jim
knowledge you acquire,
Allen's
you
book.
realize that
As a
you
Man
are just
Thinketh.
a tiny
Oh yeah,
speck.
yeah.
That was a very beautiful book.
Mm-hmm.
So there's this quote I like. I just I'm going to take this. It says, "He who would accomplish little must sacrifice little. He who would achieve much must sacrifice much. He who would attain highly must sacrifice greatly."
Yeah.
So
Mm.
going back to interpreters, sometimes we sacrifice a lot. And I think, that's the heat of it, where we have to sacrifice our time, our energy into a lot of studies. So there have been times where I've been staying up late night trying to study, trying to get the material through so that everything goes well the following day in the conference. So I would say that is the heavy part of it.
Yeah.
But I
There's a lot of
wouldn't say
worry.
that's negative, because the more you read, the more you learn, the more knowledge you acquire.
Okay. Yeah.
So and the more knowledge you acquire, you realize that you are just a tiny speck in this entire universe, and there's so much to
There's more to
learn,
learn.
so
That's
much to achieve.
And I think that's why I love doing this podcast, because every time I interview someone, I learn so much about them, or their careers, or their lives. It's just amazing. And you're right,
Definitely.
we're just a tiny speck in the realm of, the big things. We're just very, very small people, right?
That is correct.
How would you tell our audience that if they wanted to be a translator or interpreter, where should they go? Where should they go and do their courses? Or are you going to start a school for us?
Well, that's not been in the radar for
No,
now.
no. Yeah.
Well, there are online courses that maybe they can look up. In my time, there was nothing. You would just learn as you go. I would say, in my case, Language Line was my little school.
Okay.
They gave us intense training, on how to be first a customer service interpreter, how to deal with banks, how to have that terminology, and how to have those skills to interpret. So for me, Language Line is my little school, and I'm ever grateful to them.
Language Line. Okay.
Yes,
Great.
but of course that was a company that opened in Panama. Now I don't think they're in Panama anymore.
Okay.
But I do know there are many courses now. I think there's something called the California School of Interpretation, and there's things like that you can use to be an interpreter.
Perfect.
Yeah, there are many sources now.
How many conferences have you done so far?
Oh my goodness!
Have you ever counted how many you've done? Yeah.
I would say, wow, I don't want to give a number. Wow, I'm not sure.
You
I've
don't
lost
remember.
count.
You've lost count. So
I've
yeah, it
lost
must be
count.
in the hundreds, you'd say.
More than that.
More than that. You've
Definitely
done.
more than
So
that.
you're pretty busy every day then. Yeah.
Yes,
And you've
would
probably
say so.
attended a lot of conferences, that talk about women and women's needs and women, being financially independent and women working. Yeah. And what are your thoughts on that? You've heard the negative and the positive, haven't you? On both sides.
Well, I've heard conferences where, women are being uplifted, where women are told that, they definitely need to build themselves, be it financially independent or, having the right education. Because women can achieve a lot only if they put themselves out there, and they, go ahead and acquire that knowledge. So I think I'm very much in pro of that. I do believe that women should be pushed forward, or women, and actually nobody should push you. I think you're the one who is responsible to push yourself forward.
Very well said.
If we don't believe in ourselves, if we don't push ourselves forward, who will? I mean, definitely there's always somebody who's giving you that encouragement. And in my case, I have to say that my husband is the one who has been my pillar. he has supported me a lot throughout my career path, and I think I'm very blessed to have a person like that. But I think all of us do. All of us have that one special person that always pushes us, always lets us, to helps us go forward, and we should always be thankful to that. But we have to have our own initiatives as well. If we don't have our own initiative, doesn't matter how much anybody pushes you, we will not get anywhere.
I totally agreed. I love you as my guest. The words are just being spoken right out of my mouth. You're saying, it's so important that we push ourselves and we do it ourselves. I read a quote many years ago, and I've always followed it. And my son as well. I always say it: if it's to be, it's up to me. Right?
Correct.
Nobody else is going to do it. If it's to be, everybody can tell you, go do it, but it's up to me to go and actually get it done, or get it learned, or get it whatever that needs to be done.
Absolutely.
Right? And I know that you will fall back, but you can always go back and try again, just like you just said. You were so honest right in the beginning, and I was so welcoming when you said that I failed my exam the first time, but I passed it the second time. Right? So I mean, that's amazing, right? And what I say always is, when you fail, it doesn't mean that you failed. It means that you've gained experience.
That is true.
Right? So you know what to do the next time, right? But if you make a mistake, the next time it's a choice. Right?
Correct.
Yeah. So
or you don't know what not to, what not to do the next time.
And if you do it again, then it's a choice. It's not a mistake
Correct.
anymore. Right?
Correct.
Isn't it? That's
Correct.
right.
It's your choice to get up and do it again.
Get stronger. Become
as that.
stronger than your excuses. Become stronger than your excuses.
Of course.
Right? And move on and become somebody who's financially independent, because eventually I could go on about so many women I know who are under the impression that they're going to be okay, because there's savings or this or that, and suddenly, oh my God, I don't have it. They were never in place. So
to be very honest, not just because of the savings or because of being financially independent, although of course being financially independent is very important, but not just that, but let's say you are a random example. You're a full-time housewife, you're busy, you have your kids, they grow up, they leave, they follow their own passions, their own dreams.
Yep.
What are you going to do after that?
So
what are you going to do after
so
everyone's gone?
Rohini right now. My son is now independent, and you know what? I have to do something. So why not promote women?
Oh, well, that's a lovely thought.
Yeah, I know. So that at least you have the confidence to do that because you've got experience, right?
Correct.
If you don't, it's like you let yourself go. And by the time we turn into our 40s, 50s, 60s, you do slow down, right? And your brain somehow slows down too, right? And you've got to keep it active. Right?
You have to keep it active. I totally agree. And I think there's no age to begin. So,
none at all.
there's a saying in Hindi, jab jago tab savera. So, whenever you are awake, that's when
your morning starts.
The morning starts.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think, whenever you have that realization, whenever you feel like you need to push yourself and go forward, definitely do it. And in whatever passionates you. Yeah.
Now, so for the next time when we meet you again, Anjana, what are you going to tell our audience? Where are we going to see you in the next podcast? Right?
Well, whenever you would like to invite me, I'm right here.
So what are we waiting to see? What are we waiting to see in the next 6 months when we call you back?
Oh, so you're talking about my plans for the next 6 months?
What are your goals and your plans for the next few months?
My goals and my plans. Well, at this time, I am just focusing on doing my best, putting my best foot forward as a conference interpreter. I have had many beautiful opportunities that, of course, I cannot share on screen due to confidentiality issues. And I'm just working on that and trying to strengthen my skills every time.
That's perfect. I think you have really put a lot of insight into a lot of different things today, right? You've opened the eyes of, what the interpretation and translation world is about. I mean, you started your business when you were very young, and you've grown it and you've kept it going. Even though when you felt like you can't do this or you didn't want to do it, you went back into it and said, no, this is me, right? Amazing. Just an amazing, amazing story. And today you are one of the leading interpreters in Panama and translators. I think you do both, right? So, yeah.
Still in the learning.
Still in the learning. Well, I want
Still
to
in the
thank you
learning.
so much. I mean, what you've said today and to our audience has been just amazing. And we look forward to interviewing you again in the next few months, where you can share how your journey has been going on so far.
It
Right?
will be my honor.
Thank you so much for joining us today. If you have liked our talk today, please hit subscribe, like, and share. And if you want to get in touch with me and ask any questions, I will personally and confidentially answer you. stepbysteptalks.com. And I look forward to hearing from you as usual. And be happy, be safe, be sound, and keep going. Thank you very much.